Without further ado, I am going to hand the microphone over to the founder and CEO of Connect Israel, Matuka Benjamin. Matuka.
Okay, he told you already who I am, so I'll proceed. My boss is here, and one of them is Brandon, told me make it very short and to the point. So I welcome all the panelists here, and I want you to know how much I appreciate you coming. I know each and every one of you is a very busy person. I have read your bios, and I am so impressed and honored that you agreed to come. But I have to tell you that today is an exceptional event. It's a miracle that was taking place with the Abraham Accords, and it was signed, but that's not enough. The paper is not enough. What we have to do is really connect people with people, and things that we're doing, our professions, our businesses, to connect with each other and change. We have to change our perception between Jews and Arabs. Working together on many levels will help. Thank you for your participation, and good luck as we move together to combat anti-Semitism and terrorism and to promote multi-faith relations worldwide. Today is a very important day. It has never been done here yet in Los Angeles, and I don't know if any other cities have it. Connect Israel is going to connect with many other cities in the United States, and also there's an interest outside of the United States for us to start that program. So together we'll succeed to achieve our goals. And thank you again for coming. I would like to, at this time, thank Brandon Schuster that was in touch with all of you. He worked tirelessly to get this thing done. It wasn't easy. So Brandon, thank you for what you did here. And now I'll introduce the moderator for today is Eyal Biram from Israel. He's a fellow from Israel, and Daniel Yadagar is a United States representative. Enjoy. It's an important thing.
Good evening and good morning, everyone. We are grateful to be here, myself and Daniel, to moderate this important session. So just starting by saying how important it is also to my personal story, and I will just say it very briefly, but my life was completely changed through the Abraham Accords. I was wake up a year and a half ago for a life then the Accords was announced, understanding that there is such a unique opportunity, and I asked myself, how can I be part of it as a young member and as an Israeli? I decided that part of my role is to start to create the people-to-people bridge that was not so easy. And from doing it, that started from some unplanned Zoom calls that was just recorded, and I found it to be a few days after, in the beginning of August 2020, over the BBC, Ivanka Trump, and a few other areas around the world. I understood that there is a significant way and also an importance of building here foundation for longevity and long-term relations that in the end of the day, and this is what we call peace, someone can take his WhatsApp and find a friend on the other side. And doing so is a big challenge. And I'm sure that this challenge is going to be addressed tonight. I was honored to travel around this region last year and a half and to be part both in the UAE, Bahrain, and also in Morocco, and see that we have wonderful friends on the other side that are eager together with us to build a future, hopefully for a different change, and mostly to understand that we have a lot in common. And also we have a few challenges. The COVID is just one example of it. Part of it is diseases, part of it is climate change. And we have more things that we can find and use shared challenges and solve shared challenges together. And I'm sure we're gonna speak about it more tonight. So thank you again for coming. And I'm very excited to moderate this session with Danielle. Danielle, yes. If you would like to say a few words before we'll start.
Yes, I'm thrilled to be here. A huge thank you to Connect and Matuka and Brandon especially for this, and the panelists for their time. As Eyal said, this is something very near and personal to me. I have traveled to the UAE actually before the Accords and have, through people-to-people relationships, built many bridges and ties with Arab friends. One of my closest friends is Kuwaiti. So through personal experience, this is very close to my heart, and I'm thrilled to be here and host this with Eyal. So without further ado, we will start introducing our panelists.
First, we are eager and we are honored to have here tonight Rabbi Abram Cooper from the United States, California. Rabbi Albert Cooper is the Associate Dean and the Director of Global Social Action for the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Rabbi Albert Cooper has been a long-time activist for Jewish and human rights causes around the world. He meets regularly with world leaders like Pope Francis and King Hamad of Bahrain to advocate for the rights of the Jewish people, to combat anti-Semitism and terrorism, and to promote multi-faith relations worldwide.
And then we also have Dr. Majid al-Sarrah, who's based in the UAE, but today joining us from Germany. Dr. Majid al-Sarrah is a world-renowned expert in public policy, certified by the London School of Economics. And since the signing of the Accords, he co-founded Sharaka, an organization that promotes peace and builds ties between Arabs and Jews.
And I'm very happy to present a member of Knesset, Ruth Wasserman, that I also know her personally. She's such an incredible person. So Ruth, thank you very much for joining here tonight. Ruth has been involved in Israel, raised in South Africa. Has been born in Israel, raised in South Africa, and received her master's degree in the US from Harvard University. Ruth Wasserman Lande has dedicated her career toward being a champion for both global peace efforts and the diaspora of Jewish community. Today, she is the member of the Israeli Knesset for the Blue and White Party, and was recently named as the co-chair of the Knesset's new Abraham Accords cases.
And we have Dr. Sabah al-Binali, who's joining us from the UAE. Dr. al-Binali is a respected business leader who holds degrees from Princeton, Columbia, and the UK Institute of Directors. Through his role as senior executive officer and executive chairman, he's helping one of the top Israeli companies, OurCrowd, expand into the Gulf region. So with that, we're going to start with Sabah with our first question. Thank you again for being here. So you are an accomplished investor and entrepreneurial leader within the Middle East. Can you talk to us a little bit more about your experience as one of the first in the region to break the mold and really working with a Jewish business and a leader such as Jonathan Medved, who started OurCrowd, and how you're introducing and integrating an Israeli company into the Arab world?
Well, thank you for having me here. It's been quite a ride. Although I have many Israeli friends at graduate school for 6 years, my graduate advisor was Israeli. I'd never done business, so it's a different culture. There is no special approach. The UAE has been dealing with the whole world, many different countries, and Israelis have been dealing with the whole world, many different countries. So the idea that there's differences that will be difficult to overcome is not true. I didn't believe in it, and it's turned out not to be true because we've all been dealing with the whole world. The most important thing, I think, was that OurCrowd decided as a first step to find someone who's not necessarily Emirati, but who understands the Emirati market and business. And that's the approach they took. I think that's the correct approach, regardless of whether it's the Abraham Accords or not. Anytime you go into a market, especially an emerging market, you want to find someone with local knowledge. And that first step was an important step. In terms of sort of introducing OurCrowd, it's a little bit easier, and it's not just OurCrowd. There are several other major Israeli VCs who are well known globally, so introducing them has not been really that hard. It's actually the interesting thing is introducing the VC asset class, but otherwise everybody has been really curious and interested to find out what are the opportunities.
Thank you. I think while we're here, to be also interesting to understand some of the business accomplishments that you've already seen have success since the signing, and kind of what's sort of rising to the top in that sense.
Well, so the signing was in late September 2020. So it's not even a year and a half. The main deals that we've seen are government to government, which is not surprising, given that they've been in discussions for years before the announcement. In terms of the private sector, we're beginning to see, we're moving beyond the initial hype and excitement to developing deeper understanding and relationships. OurCrowd itself, we have at least 6 companies that are looking to set up here. Funnily enough, the amount of money we've raised out of the UAE for OurCrowd investments is equal to the amount of money OurCrowd has invested into UAE startups. So, and we actually, I predict that we'll see actually a surplus of inward FDI into the UAE as the global VCs get to learn about the UAE markets and the rest of the GCC. I think success here is defined not in terms of closing deals, but in terms of how various businesses, and here I'm talking about commercial success, various businesses look at deploying long-term strategies rather than transactional strategies. And we're seeing that shift as more and more companies are saying, okay, hold on, rushing in and trying to transact is not the way that it works really anywhere. And some of them are thinking about the longer term strategy. And that shift, I think, will be the foundation for the long-term connection between the two economies.
Yeah, thank you. It's very interesting to hear the stat of the amount of investment going in, and also the venture funds raised is very promising. Thank you, Sabah.
And we will continue with member of Knesset, Ruth Wasserman. So first, Ruth, I'm very glad to see you here. With your feelings, I hope that you feel better. I was glad to meet Ruth as part of her work in the Knesset, as part of my role as the CEO and the founder of Israel Is. That we usually building the peace with people to people. And I think that part of our discussion was how is the government's role in building the people to people relation. I would like to ask you, what is your vision and what is your expectation from the government to make sure that we're gonna have a war and peace?
So first of all, I'm very excited. I apologize ahead of time for my voice. I'm experiencing COVID right now. So my voice is a bit odd, and I've been quarantined for quite a number of days at home, but I'm okay. I'm also very excited, and I truly salute the opportunity to speak here with, first of all, Dr. Majid, whom I know and respect very much. I feel that he's my brother. In a relatively short time, we have really felt that this is a true friendship. And this, I think, epitomizes the whole road, the whole path, which I think our two countries have experienced. It's almost been like the breaking of the kind of an Iron Curtain or the Berlin Wall. This is the impact that the Abraham Accords had, I know, on many Israelis and obviously many people throughout the region. And when I entered my position as an MK, a member of Knesset, one of the first things I did was really ask the Speaker of the Knesset to elect me as chairperson of the caucus that would work within the Knesset, within the legislation, the legislature of the country, to promote and enhance and bring people together, exactly as you mentioned. It's a very kind of preliminary step, because this is the first of its kind, I would even say worldwide, although very recently a congressional caucus and a senatorial caucus were also launched in the United States. I'm in the process right now of meeting my counterparts, and there's also a friendship association in the UK Parliament. But ours was the first one. It was very exciting. And apparently not only I thought so, because there were many other candidates that had asked for this honor as well. Very luckily, I was chosen by the Speaker as the representative of the coalition. But the beauty of it is that there's also a co-chair from the opposition, meaning that this is bipartisan, this is not a political affiliated issue, but rather a national interest of Israel in the region. And this is indicative by the fact that this transcends political affiliation, political parties, and so on. I belong to the Blue and White Party within the government, and my co-chair belongs to the Likud Party, Ofir Akunis. Now, what we've done basically is we've already in our minds and in a roadmap set up the next 12 to 15 meetings, each time enhancing a different angle of the relations, whether it's women enhancement, whether it's business issues, whether it's cyber connected affairs and so on, academic cooperation. We're just waiting for the Knesset to be able to actually host more than 5 people in one room because of the epidemic. But one of the things that I've already done is spoken to our foreign minister in order to really reach out to his counterparts in the UAE, in Bahrain, in Morocco, and even in Albania and Kosovo, and to make a kind of a joint statement, a declaration against hatred and against anti-Semitism, which is truly a first of its kind of symbolic resonation of what this agreement is all about. And not only did he agree, this is going to be processed relatively soon, and hopefully we'll see a beautiful calling out by relevant leaders in the region against those who try to disintegrate this kind of constructive cooperation and cohesiveness, which is so good and so important for the region in terms of security, in terms of health cooperation, in terms of people-to-people, culture, business, you name it. Obviously, I don't need to sell it to everybody who's listening right now. The potential is almost, I would say, limitless. And I think another personal aspect is very much something which illustrates my involvement in this whole issue. And that is the fact that as an Israeli diplomat, before I was married, before I had kids, I served for 3 whole years as an Israeli diplomat in Egypt, in Cairo. And as you can see, I don't look extremely Egyptian. And I tried, it didn't really work, even with a hijab and different clothing. And I was the Israeli, the Jewish, the kind of, agnabiya, the strange foreigner. And for 3 whole years, it was an absolutely extraordinary experience on the one hand, but normalization was very far away from what one could characterize the Israeli-Egyptian relations for, of course, a number of reasons which we won't analyze now. But the issue that we have here is really a disintegration of the old kind of paradigms. This is a different story. This is something that takes the stereotypes, takes the biases and the old hatreds, which are very much based on a lack of knowing one another. And I think very much owing to the leadership, to a large part of the UAE, which sort of pioneered this courageous issue, sort of took on a kind of, if we're doing it right. There are going to be no cold, non-normalized sort of step-by-step relations. There's just going to be relations. And this is not a given. Knowing what we experienced in Egypt, I salute that. I am so touched and emotional by that. I cannot even express in words. And I think that the real leadership of people in Israel, of people in the US, former governments, former heads of states as well. All credit needs to be given, but also the current ones need to continue to embrace this in a very deep way in order to anchor the projects in a manner which would transcend our generation, because the next generation may not understand how fragile and important this is. And therefore, we need to work very hard on anchoring regional projects in a manner which will touch upon the lives of young people in our next generation. So thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thank you. And we had a little bit, I was having some technical difficulties, but he will be back. Thank you for your work and for sharing with us. Majid, we're gonna jump to you. Your work is very personal to me. As I mentioned, I have built a lot of relationships and sort of through the idea of people-to-people peace. You co-founded Sharaka, which means partnership in Arabic, and you were inspired by the Accords to turn the vision of people-to-people peace into a reality by building bridges and connecting people and not just letting the Accords be a piece of paper and policy. Can you tell us in more detail what the work entails and how you are working towards influencing that people-to-people relationships and changing perceptions and, to use your words, reuniting the children of Abraham?
Thank you so much. Actually, I would say, now, first of all, thank you, Connect Israel, and thanks to all my friends who invited me here. Ruth, I hope you get well very soon. My friend Halal as well, hello, thank you so much. And my dear friend Eyal Biram, thank you all for everything that you're doing. And again, I would love to say that Sharaka, it was just an idea. I exactly remember the day. It was October 2020. We were gathering with people actually who came from Israel, and it was not easy back then. They came all the way from Israel. They traveled to Kiev, and they stayed for 24 hours in Kiev because the authorities refused to take them to the UAE. And then we had to, contact a lot of people just to, tell them that it's fine. There has been an announcement, and they do have an access actually to come to the UAE. And then they traveled from Kiev to UAE. So it was really a very long flight. And when they came, I remember the first time we saw each other, we hugged, we were like shaking hands really very warmly. And I really can't explain that feeling. It feels like we know each other for a long time. And that was the moment that we knew, as I mentioned before, this is the time to reunite the children of Abraham. Because if you, I'm not an expert in history, but if you go back throughout the history, we saw that, Jews, Christians, Muslims, they were all living together peacefully in a very systematic way, coexistence at its best. And no hate, I understand, and throughout history there were so many empires, countries that wanted to expand, but between people there was absolutely respect, and there were like those norms, where I know my relation with you, I'm not going to discriminate into the society because of your religion or your race or whatsoever, especially religion. So we realize it's really important to understand and learn about each other. And in this region, and allow me to say, we did not learn a lot about the land of Israel. And, we kept on hearing the misleading media, where they show you, and I'm talking about my generation, at least. I have been in a private school. We studied different curriculum than the people in my curriculum in the UAE, and we had these discussions, they studied about Israel, Palestine, and stuff like that, but we took it from another angle. And I remember studying, the history of Jews in the land, and then I was asking myself, do I believe in Moses? Do I believe in Jacob? Because people think that they were not from Bani Israel, from the sons or children of Israel, and Israel is Jacob. And that was really, if you think of it, you know, and you give it a deep thought, you would be like, oh my God, we're really very close. All these stories, all these historic stories, and by the way, most of these stories are existing in the Quran, the holy book, you know, that we read, and we pray 5 times a day to God, and we read and recite from it, which is interesting, but you would never think of it. And again, I have to, with all due respect, blame the misleading media back then, especially in the Arab world, that will only show you the picture that Israel is a land of war. And again, I'm so sorry, you know, killing children, killing innocent people, and so on. The perception of the majority of the Arab world would be actually following these ideologies, you know, oh, hate Israel, Israel is your enemy. If you meet an Israeli abroad, do not shake hands, do not talk, do not do, and again, with all due respect, I don't mean anything, but we saw this in Egyptian movies, because those movies would be like the Hollywood of the Arab world. And people definitely would be affected or influenced by whatever they see. In reality, when we met with that delegation in Dubai, that was exactly the opposite. I saw Arabs, I saw Druze, you know, people amongst the delegation, and I was like, wow, you guys come from Israel? They said, yes. And I was like, are you Arabs or Israelis? They said, we are Arab, you know, Arab Israelis or Israeli Arabs, which was shocking, especially to me. Now, I gotta say, while doing my studies in London, I studied at London School of Economics and Political Science, so I met Jews. And in the beginning, I was just kind of like hesitant. Okay, are they gonna be nice to me? Are they gonna be, you know, and they had the same perception. They were like, oh my God, he's Arab, maybe he's, you know, he would refuse to say hello or so on. But actually, we just clicked, you know, we were sitting, we were having dinner, as I remember, as students, and we exchanged ideas and so on. And that was the moment I realized, you know, that we have absolutely no problem with Jews. In matter of fact, even in the UAE, if we analyze the policies of the UAE, since the very early establishment and founding of the UAE, the late Sheikh Zayed, who actually founded our beloved country, United Arab Emirates, it was based on coexistence and tolerance. Yeah. We were never raised on hate or to discriminate. And actually, this is an extension of what we're doing now, because we have to accept everyone, especially that Judaism is a religion from God, you know, and it was actually the first of the Abraham religion. And discussing this, and I know we have the respected Rabbi here could definitely explain it better, but I think we have a lot of similarities, and that was the result of these policies. So I have to say, established Sharaka, and the first thing we did is to have us visit Israel. And I gotta say, I was really very hesitant. They kept on telling me, come on, you know, let's do it next month. And I was like, guys, you know, just that's so fast, you know, let's cool down. They said, no, come to Israel, meet Israelis and see how it is. And I remember, like, you know, taking my kandura, because our national dress, like Dr. Sabah here, you know, it's the ghatra, nagal, and kandura. And I was wearing the kandura freely, not being afraid, but not being hesitant or maybe thinking about it twice, because we all know the Islamophobia movements and everything, probably in different countries. People were hugging me. People were just actually, you know, shaking hands with me, taking pictures. And I had the honor of visiting the Museum of Israel. Our tour guide was an Arab guy, believe it or not. And he said, yes, all the stories you hear about the prophets, about Moses, about Jacob, all these prophets, David, you know, Solomon, that you guys believe in, and we as Muslims believe in, they lived in this land. And they were from the tribes of Bani Israel, you know, of sons of Israel. And I was like, wow, you know, you as an Arab explaining this to us, it means a lot. And I visited, again, I gotta say, I visited Yad Vashem. That was completely new to me, learning about the Holocaust, exactly at the most like rich museum, that was really something, because what we saw from the Holocaust is only in movies. And it gave us a lot of like solidarity with Jews, you know. And I remember signing the log and saying, I would love to participate and take the slogan of never again. We have to stand together and hold hands together as brothers and sisters, and show the world how beautiful peace is, you know. And we, both of us, support each other and fight hate, and combat anti-Semitism. We don't accept anti-Semitism movements, and it naturally goes with the policies that we have been raised on, you know, no hate and no discrimination. And I believe that's the main objective right now of Sharaka, which is culture. It's really very important that culture would lead us to a better economy. I do a lot of research about economic sustainability, socio-economic sustainability in the region. And I believe, again, reaching to this result is understanding each other and knowing about each other's cultures, whether in the UAE, Gulf generally, or Israel. I hope that answers.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. And I think it's easy to forget that we have more in common than we do differences.
Yes.
So thank you for your work and for that.
Thank you.
I would like to ask Rabbi Cooper. Rabbi Cooper, first of all, it's great to have you here as a rabbi. And we all understand that the name Abraham Accords come from our ancient father, Abraham. That's the name of the Accords, that's also the purpose of it. And I would like to ask you, how do you believe that it's important that the Accords gonna be embraced both by Jews and Muslim communities? And how can these Accords can be a catalyst to change in the world, especially when it comes to eradicating anti-Semitism?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me to connect Israel, Matuka Benjamin, amazing people around us, to the Chaver Knesset. I hope you have Hachlama Mehira, get better fast. We need you at full speed. And to Sabah and Majid, I should probably, if I was a smart rabbi, would just say Amin or Amen and hand it right over, because you just heard the greatest pitch for tolerance from the previous speaker. In fact, everybody here has just experienced a miracle. Imagine a rabbi who voluntarily muted himself for as long as he did. So I think that's a pretty good start. I also want to pause for a moment and ask everyone for a moment of silence. We express our condolences to the victims of the recent missile attacks against the United Arab Emirates. You know, with Jews, we have a long memory for our enemies. And of course, our new friends are discovering we have a longer and deeper memory and alliances with our friends. And as you heard from our two distinguished speakers in the UAE, you know, we've reconnected with friends that very first time. Also, for full disclosure, I have never balanced a checkbook in my entire adult life. Thank God I'm married to a wonderful woman. You know, you have to say, what the heck are you having a rabbi coming on with two powerhouses in terms of economy and OurCrowd, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, I think I do have a little bit to share with you because we know that diplomats sign documents and people make peace. And everything you've heard so far is in that direction. Although, again, just be totally blunt about where we are today. The importance now of the parliamentarians in Israel, in the States, and hopefully way beyond, of showing their political support for the expansion of the Abrahamic Accords are especially important because right now, we're not really clear in terms of the foreign policy and foreign policy goals of our own government here in the United States and our own administration. And that also emphasizes how much the human DNA is going to be playing in the future. Let me share just a few personal recollections. Our first visit to the UAE was probably about 12 years ago when we met the ruler in Abu Dhabi. But what I remember most was taking a 7-minute elevator ride in the yet to be completed Burj Khalifa, There was one elevator for the workers, and it took 7 minutes to get to the top. There were no windows yet. I want to just thank publicly the amazing early efforts of Mohammed Alabar, who was in charge of that amazing project and is one of the wonderful people in the United Arab Emirates, and truly was, as a business person and a humanitarian, living and talking peace and normal interaction years before the diplomats all over the world caught up. To say how far we've gone in UAE, 4 weeks ago, in the Gulf, 4 weeks ago, I participated in a conference in Manama, Bahrain. I was hoping to get to Israel to see my 8 grandchildren. COVID would not let me in. What do you do on a Friday? Simple. You take the plane to Dubai. You have the choice of 4 synagogues. You have a wonderful Shabbat, mostly with French Jews. And on Sabbath afternoon, you go out for a walk and stand and look at the finished Burj Khalifa, and a guy on a bicycle from Saudi Arabia looks twice at the yarmulke, puts his kickstand on, we sit down and have a 20-minute conversation. And then also, I very much appreciate the comments made about learning from the Shoah, learning from the Holocaust. But how important people contacts are is 5 years ago, I asked King Hamad, when I was there with Rabbi Marvin Heyer, our CEO and founder, what would he say if the Wiesenthal Center as an NGO invited some of his citizens to come to Jerusalem? And his answer in front of his whole brain trust was, my people can go anywhere they want. And less than 2 years later, 24 faith leaders came to Jerusalem before the Accords just to breathe in the kind of normalcy that we've heard discussed, and to be able to touch and interact with reality and to break down those stereotypes. Well, tomorrow, which will be the January 27th, is the International Holocaust Memorial Day. The King Hamad Global Center for Peaceful Coexistence and the Wiesenthal Center will have a webinar about leadership and learning messages and lessons from the Holocaust. And the participants will be coming from Indonesia, from the Gulf, of course, from the United States. And this is an initiative from a partner which already a year and a half ago signed an MOU with the United States, in which they acknowledged that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. They embrace the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, and we're full partners. The bottom line that I want to sort of report to the business folks in the States and in Israel, et cetera, at this, and I think the Chabrat Knesset, Wasserman, Lande, sort of hinted to it. If we do this right, the next generation is going to have, what do you mean? It's 2 hours by plane. I'm going to have lunch and make a couple of deals. They'll have no collective memory of when the Berlin Wall was still up between Jews and Arabs. So what we have to do in the meantime, we meaning the people who can't balance our checkbooks, is we have to add the human dimension, expand the DNA of peace, the kinds of things that can be done that are not linked business cycles, that are linked to human values and shared values. That is an important component. And I can imagine that some American and maybe some Israeli and some Arab business people are saying, what? What do you mean? I have to be like an ambassador for the values of my culture and people? My answer is absolutely yes. There's still a lot of work to do to normalize it. And finally, I'm a big believer that experiencing the land of Israel sells itself to the visitor. And in terms of the Palestinians, I know many of them. We can't get into politics right now, but I'm absolutely convinced that the more that the Palestinians see visitors from the Arab and Muslim world, together with Israeli Jews, Arabs, Druze, etc., in normal interaction, this will help create the environment that's needed for the ultimate prize, which will be, peace within the Holy Land between Jews and Arabs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Cooper. It is very fascinating to hear your perspective, especially how the Accords can fight anti-Semitism and hopefully have enormous more positive effects that we already see it. I would like to ask our all speakers. We all see here a group that haven't been asked yet the question, and I will just say that in 5 minutes we're going to have a Q&A that we're going to open this discussion to hear what is your thoughts about it and of course your insights. But before that, I would like to ask, I'm sure that I'm speaking behalf of the group. We have here a group of people with different backgrounds, part of them in the business, part of them in the civic society area and more. And I'm sure all of them are interested to be part of it, to support it. What do you see as the regular person can do that we will be able to support the Accords and hopefully to see it keep growing and this movement also bringing more countries to be involved? I would like to ask each one of you that independently can unmute himself and answer.
Well, I'm happy to start if you don't mind. I think really it's about connection. I mean, how did I get connected to OurCrowd, an Israeli VC? When the Abraham Accords were announced, John Medved started calling all his American friends. You guys have been doing business in the UAE. I need an Emirati. I need an Emirati to be my partner in the UAE. I, on the other hand, called all my friends in the States and said, this is great. I want to go to Tel Aviv and start up. And a friend of mine for 30 years from university when I was in the States, who also knew John Medved, his name's Randy Wynn, he put us together. You know, and I think that role, and you can see with Connect Israel as well, the role of Americans, not America, but Americans, I think is an important role, because when you have two new friends, what brings them closer together? It's a mutual friend who can bring them together. And I think that Americans here have a very important role in that. And I've seen many examples, not just in business, of this happening. And the more that Americans engage, and I think the greater the cementing of this new relationship.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
It's a good reminder for all of us to just keep building off the relationships we have and how long lasting, like from 30 years, where we can go. So we have just 2 more minutes, but would love to hear from someone else the answer before we go.
I'd like to jump in here, say two things as an American. Number one, we're all voters. Doesn't make a difference for Democrat or Republican. We have to make sure that our elected officials in Congress, as well as the administration, knows about our support and why we support the Accords and how we see it as Americans and American Jews. American Jews are known to be very philanthropic and also very involved in writing checks to politicians. That's the American way. So first and foremost, anyone who's a citizen has what to say, and we need to find ways to say it. And of course, with social media, that's easy enough. The second point, because we have also a distinguished audience, and that has to do with people who are involved with NGOs. When I had to quote unquote divert 4 weeks ago for Shabbat to Dubai, I met on Saturday night with a senior official from the Sudan. And the most important takeaway from that meeting came at the very end when he said in his area, in his zip code of Port Sudan, there's no vaccines. Here in America, they need 3, Israel's talking about 4, debates, protests. When you meet real people and you put a human face on a situation and you strip away all the titles, there is so much humanitarian needs out there that the more you interact, you're going to find almost immediately many other things that you can do. And by the way, we can say thank you through the Chaveret Knesset, not to have anything to do with me, but 3 days later, Israel dispatched, I believe, a few 100,000 vaccines to the Sudan. Now that's a start. I don't know what other countries did, what if anything they did, but along with the exposure and the involvement comes responsibility. ability. And not every peace partner is at the great level of a UAE or Bahrain or Morocco. When you have Sudan and potentially other countries, for a while, it's going to be, I think, an uneven, if you will, trade. And that means you're going to need business people with those forward-looking glasses, and you're going to need alongside humanitarian experts to give the people in each of these societies a reason to embrace the Abraham Accords.
Oh, I'm muted, absolutely. Okay, we are going to jump to a Q&A, and I'm going to introduce Brandon Schuster to help us moderate that, because you don't want me messing with the Zoom raising hands. It will not go as planned. So Brandon will let you jump in and start the Q&A from here for us.
Of course. So we have just a couple more minutes left of our wonderful hour, and thank you so much to our incredible panelists. I ask that if you have a question for our esteemed panelists, that you please use the raise hand button feature, and then I will call on you to come off of mute. But please do not come off of mute if you have not been called on. So yep. So hang on one second. I think yes. So John Marish, I believe. Hang on. Asked on mute, and then if you want to ask your question, you should be able to.
Great. Thanks so much. This is obviously all a great start. We clearly are also connected by the threat that comes from other countries, like from Iran. How can we use this connection, this new friendship, to build upon to reduce or eliminate that threat, or even better yet, to quote a famous Swedish person, the best way to get rid of your enemies is to make friends out of them? Is that too Pollyannish or too naive? What can we do together to deal with the looming threat of Iran? Thank you.
Well, although politics is not my background, I'll say this. When one has a neighbor that one might have issues with, a joint approach will usually be a much more effective approach than independent, uncoordinated approaches. I think that this matter is really complex, and as we've seen with the drone strikes against the UAE over the last couple of weeks, that it's not going to be a quick solution. But I do think that overall the Abraham Accords, not just with Iran, but for the Middle East as a whole, is a great step forward in decreasing tensions. And I think that this can only, as Rabbi Cooper said, the more we broaden it, the better it is, not just for the Middle East, but the whole world.
May I answer, Brandon?
Quickly, yes, thank you.
Very quickly and very, if I may, discreetly, because some things are better left unsaid, but strategic partnerships and liaisons vis-a-vis mutually harmful axes are certainly something that I think all of our leaderships have in mind. Israel has been very clear that it stands by the UAE, given the very recent attacks that have been performed by the Iranian proxies in Yemen, the Houthis, against the UAE. And what is heartwarming, frankly, is not only the leadership came out, but there were so many spontaneous expressions of togetherness from people. It wasn't called for. It wasn't something they had to do. They just did. And this is something that is not a given. I mean, it's sort of a kind of a fraternity that is, Israelis love to be loved. And I think that the UAE is pretty good at giving love. And that's what happened in the beginning. And I think this is not something to be sort of written off. This is it's real, and it can also have an impact, a real one, as a not only in retaliation or defense, but also as making a statement that neither one of us is alone against attacks, which is a psychological state of mind, whereas beforehand each one of us was separate, and that I think is very important in the region.
Thank you so much. The next person is going to be Cohen. I'm going to add you here, so if you can come off mute.
Great. Hey guys, thank you so much for this panel. This is amazing, and we're so grateful to you for coming today. So my question is, and I don't know if we can really get into this, but to what extent is this US administration helping or hindering the progress of normalization at this time, either with our current peace partners or with expanding the circle of peace?
Ruth, you're actually on mute.
Yeah, I don't want to take over. Just perhaps there's somebody else who wants to answer, and then I'll add something, but I do have something to say on it.
No, please say.
Cool. May I?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
okay, I always say that the initiative, having been taken by former President Trump and former Prime Minister Netanyahu, along with the leadership of the current leadership of the UAE, Bahrain, and so on, is certainly to be commended. This is, again, unprecedented, game-changing, and very, very courageous. Nonetheless, I think that despite the media campaign that has been very prominent in the US, whereby the current administration won't even say the words Abraham Accords. When I was there and met with some senior figures in the White House around October, that was not the answer that I got, and I felt that it was sincere. In fact, not only did they not have a problem with the term Abraham Accords, they kept saying it again and again, and they seemed to be also wanting to have their own kind of baby. In other words, to have their own achievement, that they themselves will have their own administration named after, such as an addition to the Abraham Accords. And I think that this is an important angle with which to view the current administration's involvement in the Abraham Accords. And this needs to be strengthened and enhanced. And one of the ways to do it, in my humble opinion, is to emphasize how bipartisan this issue is. And therefore, the caucus in the Congress and in the Senate is so important because it transcends the Republican Democratic lines. So does the one in the Israeli Knesset. And this is very, very important point to keep pressing the current administration, other administrations that will come after, to really bring home the point that this is a national interest of the United States, because it really is another expression of regional stability, which is the interest of all of us. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, so I'm going to invite Tomer Nitzan, who's one of our Israeli fellows, to ask this one.
Hi, everybody. Very, very quick remark. Just, it's a great panel. Very, very exciting learning experience, and I'm very happy to be in direct correspondence with fellows from the UAE. I think that people have raised interesting matters. Somebody said at some point, I believe it was Rabbi Cooper, that said that we're not going to go into politics, and apparently we were dragged into politics. So that's the nature of this region. But I think that what we can learn from that, and I actually want to share a very close and kind of like business personal experience from where I'm working, that politics is just, that's not the key. That's not, it's not really what's going to be creating a change, unfortunately. I think that politics is definitely not the way to do it. I mean, one of the best icebreakers I have when I'm dealing with explaining Israel and defending Israel on the first reactions, like Dr. Majid has mentioned on his correspondences with Jewish folks around the world, is that I'm just bringing in the example of how BDO, which is the company I work for in Israel, what are we consisted of? And I'm starting to line up all the Arab Israelis that are partners at BDO. And I'm just sharing just the information of how co-sided we are here and coexisted in Israel, as opposed to what the global media is mentioning. So I think that we definitely need to focus more on the actual interactions, the actual business making, the actual opportunities for mutual growth on both lines, both sides of the fence, excuse me. Not just in between Israel and the UAE. I'm also talking about the Palestinian territories in Israel. I mean, I have had the pleasure of meeting Bashar al-Masri, who is a major public figure in the Palestinian authorities, and he had said the same thing. Politics is just ruining everything. He doesn't let the PLA doesn't let them into his business because that's just ruining everything he's doing. And he's creating a real bridge in between the territories of Palestine and the state of Israel. He has a lot of technology connections between Israeli technology companies that he's bringing in to his areas of expertise. But as Rabbi Cooper said, enough about politics. I want to ask my fellows, just for the sake of continuing this social differences discussion, what are the do's and the don'ts of doing business in the Emirates? Like, I know that if I need to explain that for an Israeli client going into the USA or vice versa, greeting anybody coming in from the United States to Israel, I know about the do's and don'ts, but is there anything that you can flag out that will be a major strike or a major thumb up for creating a very friendly environment for business making? Thank you.
Majid, do you want to answer this?
Well, definitely, I think Dr. Sabah is the businessman here, but allow me to explain in the beginning my point of view, because even in the business world, you have something called the cultural aspect. You have the organizational behavior. So one organization could have certain behavioral traits which is different than the other organization. And that's why we see people moving from one place to another and they don't fit in and then they change. So for me, it's really important to understand the behaviors. How can we understand it? By knowing the culture. The culture, for example, in the UAE is, I want to make a business with this person, but first of all, let's get together. Let's probably share a meal together. Let's have a Shabbat dinner together, and then maybe I can invite you for Ramadan iftar, something like that. Let's learn about each other. Let's create this trust between us. You know what I mean? It's not like, with all due respect, I'm doing some kind of research. So, for example, if you go to a Chinese person, these things doesn't matter. They don't matter. Sorry. I mean, they just want to make business. They will jump to the point. Take it or leave it. Let's do it or let's not. But again, I would say it's important to understand the culture, knowing it generally, first of all, and then probably trying to proceed doing the business. But maybe for more specifics, if you don't mind, maybe Dr. Sabah, you probably can go into details about these aspects.
Sure. I mean, look, Israelis aren't the first foreigners to come to the UAE. They've come from all over before. The Russians were interesting when they first came, and so on. I think, look, as with any business foray into a new geography, the first thing is ask, what is it that your counterparty is interested in? What you see, and this is not just Israelis, but all foreigners when they first come to the UAE, look what I have here, buy it. Maybe I don't want it. So the first thing should be ask. You ask of the person that you're trying to transact with, you ask of others, and you talk with them. And as Majid said, you take the opportunity to do this in informal settings. So once you do that, I think you'll find the path much easier.
So thank you very much for this incredible session.
Thank you, everybody.